Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's Fight Chat Friday, where myself and Richie are going to sit down and talk about the do's and don'ts of that last couple of days or the day of preparation leading into a major event, whether that's a competition, a grading, or a big performance that you're expecting from yourself, and how to navigate that and come out of it expecting to do well.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Fight Chat Friday. So we have a little bit of a different one today. We're just kind of mixing up. So we've got some questions recently about people kind of struggling with this whole idea of preparing the day of an event or whatever. Obviously, we're not doing too many things these days in terms of events and gradings, at least for the whole world. Some people are, some countries are a little bit ahead and things like that with the coronavirus. But it is a good thing. And one of the things that we will be touching on based on this is preparing and
Yeah.
actually having a system with this and being prepared to actually to come at this with a structure and a bit of a routine. So if this is something that really kind of applies to you and it may be something that you struggle with, maybe it's a good time to get some questions in and we can cover some topics. We're going to cover a lot of things like the night before, covering sleep, covering food, covering warm-ups, all these things. So it's going to be really, really good. Happy birthday to Mr. Byrne as well.
Hey, thanks, Dana.
So yeah, we're going to cover lots of these topics, and I think that it is something based on my own previous knowledge, and I'm sure Adrian is in the same boat. It's something that we all experience and all have to go through. In terms of like the stress, the anxiety, getting your warm up right, the peak performance, all of these things. So I think it's going to be a really interesting episode, and it will definitely help a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think it's important, even before we jump into this, that the kind of questions that generated this episode were aimed at things like, how do I get my legs feeling good before I go on the floor? How do I warm up properly for whether it's competition, inspiring pattern, or grading? It was all geared around that kind of right. How do I get it right on the day? And the first thing that came to mind is, you don't get it right on the day by starting on the day. You've got to get it right on the day by starting
Absolutely.
well in advance of the day. And that's a big deal for us, I think, for both of us personally, because it's when you realize that you can't prepare in the last minute for the last minute. You have to prepare so much in advance so that that last minute happens according to a plan. And
Yeah.
and although, the questions come in, we were talking about, how do I feel physically good? How do I feel emotionally ready? You do that by everything feeling like it's going according to plan, and
Yeah.
I think that's
And that can be very, very useful as well, because it can keep you present and keep you in the moment, especially if you are one of those people who kind of suffers from overthinking and maybe the mental aspect of it.
yeah.
It can be great to have that plan to keep you on track. But a lot of the tools and some of the things that we're going to talk about today, like as you said there, Adrian, they're things that you need to practice in advance. It's not like you can just turn up to the event and expect it to be there ready for you. It's something that you kind of need to work with in preparation and work with a trial and error, tweaks here and there, like, because all of these routines are going to be different for different people. So
Yeah.
that is very, very important to note as well.
So maybe what we can start with is, we're very fortunate we could get a video that shows the warm-up area from like the pressure cooker of a major championship. So we're looking at ITF World Championships in Gisolo, and this was in 2015. And it's the kind of backstage video looking at the teams warming up and preparing before going on to the event. And it also captures a few other scenes here and there. Now, I think what we'll do, we'll play it without any sound. Myself and Richie will maybe talk over some of the things that you're going to see, good, bad, and indifferent. But if you've never been at a major championships, this is about as bad as it gets. Okay. And I don't mean in terms of like organization or anything. It's like, there's always challenges when you get to major championships. But in terms of how it feels and what the pressure feels like and how it can build up that, the tension in the room that you can cut with a knife, you'll start to feel it. And people do silly things. And this all arises out of not having a plan for that particular scenario. So maybe we'll just play that video. We'll do a little bit of a voiceover and make some sense of it for people who are watching. But all the principles that we take from this level, we can apply right back down to preparing for a green belt grading or, whatever it happens to be, because the same principles apply, but the magnitude differs. So let's have a look. So first of all, beautiful city, Gisolo. If you do get a chance to visit, right, right there across from Venice. Fantastic spot.
Yeah, one of my favorite events. I think it was really good.
Yeah.
Yes, you can see here, first off, people everywhere, and people are doing all different sorts of things, and you can see that people are warming up in different ways. Some people are kind of getting blown away by the magnitude of the event and things like that.
Yeah, and like when you're there are personalities. So there are people within the sport, of course, that everybody knows. And if you're new to it, you can't help but be caught up a little bit with the persona. Like you have coaches or athletes who aren't competing, throwing shots. You've got, you know, completely different ways of preparing for everything, and it's all one on top of the other.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that that's something like now is not the time to be learning something new or to be working on something for the first time. Really, this is something, as we said, you need to have prepared. You need to know what you're doing, and that will give you a little bit of freedom and just that little bit of comfort as well. Like throwing shots maybe that you're comfortable with, that you expect to be using, not learning new techniques or doing things that aren't really relevant to what you're going to be doing on the mats. And it's
Really
different for
important.
everybody. It really is different to everybody.
And you can almost get a sense when you look at people within a clip like this of who is doing what they know and what they've prepared and what they've
Mhm.
expected versus who is doing something because, well, I'm here and I should do something.
It's
Um,
a good example, yeah.
yeah, and it's just one of those things that people will get caught up with it, and it'll break their normal routine. And seeing all of these, countries you might never have seen before, it does have an impact. And then you can also see some people preparing maybe to go into a weigh-in here.
Mm.
So this is important. This might not actually be the video from mid-competition. This could just be the warm-up day in and around the weigh-ins and all of the rest of that as well. So the space could be even more crowded than at other times. But remember, you carry that
Mhm.
tension with you forwards into the day. I just spotted myself in the background there. But yeah, this pressure cooker thing of people queuing up for weigh-ins and all the rest of it, it does raise people's level of anxiety. And you do need to be prepared for it so that it doesn't overwhelm you. And you also have to take steps and measures so that you keep it in control the whole way through. Stefan and Mark. Um,
Yeah.
so
But
like,
I think as well with this, it's important to know why you're there. We see like some
yeah,
people, it's great the day beforehand to see people you know and enjoy the experience, but you don't want to get caught up in that either, and to be expending a lot of energy with maybe if you're new on the team, you're excited by it, and maybe like there's lots of new friends, you're in new tracksuit, all of these things, and you don't want to leave these things kind of like expend on your energy that you will need. You're there for a job, and that's the most important thing to note.
yeah.
And to be sure of that and know why you're there, and that comes first.
Yeah, and even making the right comparisons, because we've often seen it with people, they turn up to a black belt grading and they're not used to grading with all of these people from the rest of the country. And they arrive and they see someone sitting in splits, or they see someone, standing with their leg in the air, just, counting to 30 while holding a head high side kick or something like that. And they get caught up with the fact that, should I be able to do that?
Yeah.
I don't, should I be, and people start to, stretch their imagination a little bit. And nobody does it in their own
Comparing.
favor. Yeah, nobody does it in their
Yeah.
own favor. Nobody looks at someone else and says, "Oh, I can do that so much better than they can.
Yeah.
I have nothing to worry about here." Like that comes with a lot more experience, but that's not where you start. So let's maybe jump into a document that you prepared. Like we've got versions of this between you and I, but you have a very nice one that you've prepared for your students, and
Hmm.
it doesn't matter whether the event is a competition necessarily, although this is what it was designed for, or a
Yeah.
grading, but it starts to frame things for the athletes, I think, in a very, very, very productive way by getting them to take action. And I think this is the really powerful part of this, that the first thing you're asking a person to do is take action themselves, because you can't do this for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's massive. So do you want to start maybe talking through the sections here and what the intention is by having the person complete those sections?
Yeah, so the purpose of this is just to give people a little bit of structure and to help them kind of navigate their plan for the event. And that's literally what it's called. It's an event plan document. You see here, it says the event at the top, and it goes through maybe one of your main reminders or something that you want to keep in control. But if you look through it, it's a lot of the things like the strengths and the smart thinking and things like that you want. And you also see it kind of feeds into the game plan. And we can talk through these things as we go through. But it's basically taking everything that you have control over, which is very, very important, because as
Yeah.
Adrian just mentioned, you looking at people with their leg in the air and comparing yourself to them, that's completely out of your control. So you need to be able to draw on your strengths and the things that you're good at and bring them to the forefront. And by having a routine, having a structure, it really gives you just that bit of comfort that you can bring with you. And then you
Yeah.
can adjust and go as you need to. Maybe this is not the way you're tweaking here, you're tweaking there. And then it has like a little bit of a routine at the end, your visualization, your warm-up, your motion control tools, and things like that. So it's just a basic structure really to give a bit of framework to all this.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, we both do something similar and we get to it in different ways. And one of the things that
Yeah.
I have is I've got kind of a longer form questionnaire with lots of multiple choice or kind of short answer questions in it to try and get the person to consider some of the things that you've got there. So, arriving to what the strengths are, arriving to what they feel are controllables, or as we'll discuss later, um, arriving to their preferences around how they warm up, how they prepare, what they do in the day before. And it just helps me to understand where they're at so that when I'm coaching them, I'm not guessing off of their body language, the words and phrases they're using, their demeanor on the day. I'm kind of trying to figure the athlete out. And this is really important when we're working on national team and they might not
Yeah.
be a student that I've developed a relationship with over years. So understanding what it is that goes through their mind, how they feel about things, how they like to prepare, what makes them feel comfortable. A really good example of, we take Owen O'Brien, right? A guy that we're both very familiar with, but coaching Owen, I don't coach him at national championships, but when we go away to an international championships, I've coached Owen a few times. And Owen will just, ideally, he'll just banter. Like he'll
Yeah.
just, if you can keep it laughing, joking, keep it light until the second you walk, he almost wants to be surprised that he's in a ring, and facing off against someone. And that's where he wants to be. But
And
other
that
people
works
are
because it's him.
totally different because it's him.
That's
Yeah.
his personality, and that's the important thing. Like if
Yeah.
you're a happy-go-lucky fun person, like it doesn't make sense for you to go in there like Mike Tyson, you know what I mean, and vice versa. If you're a
Yeah.
very like serious person, it doesn't make sense for you to go in and be all easygoing and laughing and having fun, because it's not your personality. And a lot of time it's what you want to express on the floor as well. Is your style going to be that serious, grinding, hard style? Is it that flowy, natural style when we're talking sparring, at least? And I
For
think these
sure.
things go very much hand in hand.
Yeah, and so when we come back to this plan, this is helping the athlete to understand themselves so they can communicate that
Yeah.
with you. And in the end, in filling out the questions, they've had to think about it and write something down. And now they have something that if they're not really feeling comfortable talking to you about it, asking questions of you, demanding of you, or whatever it happens to be, you as a coach now have something that they've written down that you can then ask them questions of so that you can fully
Mm.
understand it. But it's empowering, and this is what I like about it.
And it gives people like that structure, because like it's not just this page. Obviously there's all the context and the stuff
Yeah.
behind it that helps with that, and to guide you to fill out each section and to know what you need to know about and things. So like there's chats going on before this that we've done in the club, there's other documents to support this is just the one that they bring with them to the event. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of, like, for example here, smart thinking. There's a big list of things to keep people in the challenge mindset, not kind of getting overwhelmed. And there's lots of things they can pull and draw and insert for their own point of view in here. So the purpose of this document is it's quite flexible to allow people to insert what's right for them. And then we have also a post-event document, which is to adjust, to analyze what went well, what didn't, keep what's working, adjust what's not working so well, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's maybe think in terms of some of the things that we just looking at that controllables, right? That very first
Mm-hmm.
box, first section, and we can have a little bit of a look at the preparation. And I wanted to kind of talk about, as well as the longer term preparation that goes on beforehand. What about just we
Yeah.
say the day before,
Mm.
the day or two before the event, and some of the things that really become important at that stage are, have you mentally rehearsed what's going to happen on the day? And I mean, for me, it's kind of like it's everything from getting yourself out of bed, what you're going to have for breakfast, where you're going to put the bag in the car, uh, arriving at the venue, who you're going to see, what it's going to feel like, how it's going to sound, look, feel, etc. And then really thinking through your performance and even the preparation, the warm up for your performance, and how that is going to feel, because it means that there's that reassurance of things coming up as expected, and you have that kind of, I've been here before, I've handled this before mentally, I can do this again, which is really powerful. And I think the mental rehearsal can start days before, months before, but the day before, to like set aside a little amount of time for that, I think is really important, because again, it just settles you into, this is what's happening. And sometimes there's a certain kind of person who puts it off and tries not to think about it. And I think then you can be overwhelmed by the experience when it hits. Where if you've structured your thinking about it, you're less likely to be overwhelmed by when it happens.
And that's what it is. Like, what is overthinking? But it's you either being in the past, what you're thinking, or in the future.
Yeah.
And what does this allow you to do? It gives you structure that you can follow it along bit by bit. You're not worried about what comes next until it comes. And that's what's very, very important about it as well. And I think in the preparation, like this document itself and all of this stuff is an example of the preparation you can control. Where if you're just rocking up to the event and you just leave this stuff to chance, you're not in control of it. And it's something that you kind of, that phrase, fail to prepare, prepare to fail, comes into mind here when you talk about this stuff.
For sure. So the next bit that you've got, and it's like, for me, it's super important, again, whether it's a tournament or grading, because the tendency is in Taekwondo, these are long events. So like, you're gone for the day. So for most, we'll say, okay, maybe for color belt grading, it's a bit shorter, but for a black belt grading or a national or international championships, you're at least gone for the day. So your rest, your meal prep, your packing, like those things become really important, because we've seen there are so many stories of the guy at the championships, and it probably happened in just solo, where they arrive and they forget their ID card. And then they're performing this like sprint back to the hotel to pick up the ID card because you can't get weighed in and blah, blah. And they could be doing that dehydrated, not having eaten, and they're sprinting to and from a hotel, because if you miss your time slot, you're disqualified. Why didn't you pack your ID card? It's just the simple things. But it's because you haven't got your routine. You haven't worked out where everything goes, and you haven't done your double check or your checklist to make sure everything is there. So having a routine around packing your bag for the event, knowing what you need to have in that bag, taking it all out, putting it all in again, making sure it's all there and it's all in the compartments that it should be, reassures you, because you're not nervous walking down the street then, or arriving at the event going, have I forgotten everything? And I mean, we do this year in, year out, except for the last 12 months, when we travel abroad on a holiday, when we, you make sure you have your sunscreen, your international adapters, your phone, your charger, or whatever it is you need. You make a list, you tick it off. But I've rarely seen competitors make a list and check it off, that everything is in the bag where it's supposed to be. But some are very good at repeating a routine. It's the same stuff. Famously for our club, like Shane O'Rourke used to always tell the guys, okay, have you got your gum shield? Yeah. Have you got your other gum shield for when you lose that gum shield? And it was one of those things of like, why would I lose my gum shields? And he's like, just because you will. And the coaches, have you packed an extra spare black belts because someone's going to lose one? It's that kind of thing. Thinking ahead, having that sorted means you don't have to sort a problem on the day, which causes that elevated stress. And then even just those meals, it's like, how much water am I going to need, and have I got it? And have I learned what without gas means in a particular country, because that's a huge you arrive and it's
that's like, so true. You forget about that.
Oh, the pink caps in the bottle in Italy, and you're like, oh no. And you discover it at ringside when someone passes you a bottle and you open it up and goes, they're just getting rid of their bad bottle.
But even simple stuff like food. Yeah, but even very simple, like preparing what type of food that you eat, because in a foreign country, they might not have the regular foods that you eat, and just having that stuff there. Maybe there's a canteen there, maybe there's not. And just having all of that stuff checked off and prepared is so, so important. We actually have a video as well with Erica Stevens that we did last summer on how to prepare your nutrition for a competition and things like that. So maybe we'll link that up on a card here as well. It might be useful for people in terms of the nutrition side of things, what to eat, what not to eat, and things like that. On that, like, try to be aware. A very good link here with sleep as well is your caffeine intake. Like, you see people horsing in. Like, I'd be the first to admit I love a can of Monster, but like, there's peaks and troughs that come with caffeine intake, and especially your sleep. If you like, It's not a holiday where you're going out trying out these new fancy drinks and stuff like that. Like, try to keep things simple, try to keep things the same way that you've had them all along. You don't want to upset your body in something that it's not used to, especially with your sleep. You don't want to be taking caffeine after maybe 2-3 p.m. in the day.
Yeah.
If you don't want it to affect your sleep. You don't want to be horsing into a can of it in the morning that you're competing, then getting a bit of a drop, and then it's trying to keep these, just being clever with these things.
As much as we're talking about, how do you feel after a bad night's sleep on a regular day? And, you can have a fairly rough start to your day at work. You can find yourself grumpy and moody and all those things later on. Concentration is more difficult. Work challenges are harder. School challenges are harder. Now lump onto that you're actually expected to perform at your best because it's a tournament, it's a grading, whatever. And having poor sleep in the run up to it just exacerbates all of the problems. So the problem is you can't fix your sleep the night before. So if you sleep if you normally sleep very well, then yeah, maybe it's fine. But the amount of people who do struggle with sleep, and in particular the night before an event, is quite a high number. So we just put together a few simple things that you can do, and it's better if these are practiced long term. But they're simple things that you can do to improve your sleep quality for the night before the event. So if you're waking up feeling fresh, it's going to be better for you. And the first thing is, and this is more important if you're traveling away, but like try and go to bed at the same time every night. But if you're traveling away, trying to adjust to the time zone, like it's within most of Europe, there's an hour in the difference. It's not hard to go to bed a little bit earlier, or a little bit later, depending on, it's always earlier. By our understanding of things. Yeah. But, go to bed a half an hour earlier, and it means that half an hour difference when you get there is minimal. It doesn't make any difference. But you're usually, for us, because we're often traveling to Dublin, both of us. So you're getting up early on the day that you're traveling to Europe. So you're having an extra long day anyway. So that getting to bed earlier in the run up to the event is really beneficial.
And chances are, like, these are long events, long days, you will be tired. But the problem here with the schedule is you're excited because you're away with people, especially if you're a junior, you might be first trip that you're going away. You're excited to see your friends, things like that. And you're staying up late in the room, chatting, whatever. That's very important that you have your schedule to say, okay, right, if we want to perform at our best now, that's it. We need lights out here. We need to be in bed by this time. You can just not hang around the lobby late at night, things like that. So again, simple things, but you take it for granted, and they really do impact your performance.
For sure. And part of that is remembering that the point to it is, the performance on the day. Everything else is a bonus. So the phrase goes, when you look at the experts, bed is for two things. Sleep is one of them. The other one doesn't really bear mentioning on those trips away anyway. So don't bring work to bed. Don't spend time puzzling over and solving problems and running things through in your head when you go to bed. It's for sleep and exercise, and that's it. So this is usually in the run up to the event, but even on the night before the event, everybody is, it's often a big thing that people are looking for a Facebook check-in or see who's here, see who's doing what. It's just, you have to just get used to just leaving it, and it can be hard to do. Managing your stress, or just the idea of journaling before bed, is something that a lot of people have started to find useful, just as a way of just like compartmentalizing the things that are going through your head. So when you write down the concerns, the thoughts, the ideas that are going through your head, well, you've done something with them and you've engaged with them, and now they'll leave you alone. So it's like a needy child or whatever it happens to be. Once there's been some engagement, you might get a little bit of relief from that. So that's just something that you can do. And recognizing that, like, there are other life stresses that would be going on at the same time in the run up to any of these events. You can't deal with them right now because you have to perform tomorrow. You need to maybe just make a note of it, write it down. That's something for later. And it helps it just take it out of your head and get you into the right frame of mind.
Yeah, and I think the screens is probably the biggest thing. We've all been there, lying in bed, and you flick on your phone, you go through a notification, the next thing it's 2 hours later. You know what I mean? That's it's one that you need to just turn off the phone, have your alarm set, and just put it somewhere else, and don't bring it into bed, because it can be something that it just kind of spirals. You end up down a rabbit hole Googling something, and you end up scrolling for the sake of scrolling and things like that. So it's best to not get sucked in by that.
So for me, then the next thing is, when people know they're going to have a tough time sleeping, sometimes they start to think in terms of medication, particularly the adults. And an important thing to note is that a sleeping pill is not actually going to put you to sleep. It's going to knock you unconscious, which is basically the same as, you know, the experience you have when you have a bit too much alcohol. You're not experiencing restful sleep. You're not spending time in REM sleep. And what that means
Mm.
is you're going to wake up, you're going to fall asleep and you're going to wake up. So you're not spending the time staring at the ceiling, but you don't wake up rested. And, you know, and that's not really something that you want to develop a reliance upon. You know, it's an emergency kind of situation. It's better than no sleep, but it's not sleep. So we can do much better. And Richie has already covered the caffeine. So, you know,
Yeah.
in particular, like it's something that you might be accustomed to. If you drink a lot of coffee, if you drink a lot of Monster on a regular, you know, you might get to 6, 7, 8 in the evening and not have any, you know, lingering effects per se. But for most people, you know, if you have caffeine the later half of the day, don't expect to get immediate restful sleep. Myself, it turns out I can have 16 espressos to 1 o'clock in the morning and be asleep at 5 past 1. It's
Yeah.
just it's a bad habit. So particularly at championships, the amount of coffee I go through at a championships
It
is
almost keeps you
unreal
going if you're a coach, really, because
when
the
you're coaching.
coaches are on the go all the time.
But at the same time, I don't get to the end of the championships in any way feeling like I've had a good night's sleep in a week, and you usually
Yeah.
crash when you get home. So let's just not put that up there as a good example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Developing a bit of a ritual around how you go to bed and everything that you do is a great idea, particularly if you just have something quick and relaxing that you do before you go to bed. And a super example that's relevant to us is have a little bit of a light stretch. So, you
Mm.
know, spend a little bit of time just easing into your stretches, spend no more than 30 seconds in each one, and don't go for the end range or anything like that. Just spend a little time focusing on your breathing, sitting in a stretch, and go to bed. It's, you know, for some people, it's take a shower. You know, it can be really simple things that you can do anywhere in the world, but it just, if it's the thing you do before you go to sleep, your mind latches onto routines like that and goes, oh yeah, this is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It's like when the lights get dark, you start to think it's late and you start to prepare the, you know, the
The
melatonin
body gets
fixing.
used to these things, like, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
knows it's time to go to sleep and things like that as well. Yeah, it's like it happens to me all the time when you read in bed. It's like you probably get about 3 pages and you doze off. Whereas like if
yeah.
I'm, as I said earlier, when I'm on my phone, I'll probably be up an hour later, and like it's not where you're more tired or less tired. It's just that a bit of a routine, and your body knows, okay, we're shutting down the system a little bit here.
Yeah, and the screens are a very relevant point there. It's like those things are getting into your like again, it's that blue light. It's triggering arousal. It's waking you up as such, and you
Mm.
know it's the opposite of what you're looking for at that time. And to that end, like I've included the sleep mask there. I mean, at home it might be blackout blinds, but you can control the environment if you're traveling. Even if you're just going, you know, 2 counties, 3 counties over and staying in a hotel the night before a grading.
Mm.
You can't control that. That might be over a nightclub. It might be next to a busy road. It might have just, you know, it might be very bright. And certainly we've had that, you know, where it gets bright at 5:30 in the morning in Spain or something, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be awake now. So
Mm.
if you can control that, a sleep mask, as much as it's not a fashionable thing for fellas to wear, um, you know, complete darkness does help your body adjust to and get ready for
Yeah.
sleep. Um, the two other little points I had in here, just we've already talked about prepping for the next day, but that also is restful for your mind because you now know you've put away problems that are not going to stay with you. Like if you're thinking you still need to pack your bag, you still need to do whatever, you know, you can't actually relax on that. You know, it still needs to be done. What if I sleep in? And worries build up. So that's one. And then the final thing is if you do tend to take a power nap, make sure it's early in the day and very short, 20 to 30 minutes. Any longer than that, and you tend to get into that more restful sleep, and then you're pulling yourself out of it, and you're going to feel more tired than you were. And you're probably not going. If you struggle to go to sleep, naps probably should be avoided anyway, and try and get the sleep done in
What
quality time.
what are we talking about here? It's all about the stuff we can control. So the more stuff you can
Yeah,
control, get it done. If you can't control it, don't worry about it so much. Do what you can do and go from there. So don't be up worried about something that you can't control. It's
yeah.
what can you control and manage. And I think that's the most important thing on the sleep.
So what about then? You've arrived to the day of the event. Now we have a plan.
Yeah.
Now we have a good night's sleep. We have packed our food. Now we could, again, we won't talk about the food in detail, but we've packed our water and our food so that we're going to be well
Mm-hmm.
fueled throughout the day. We have all of our gear, so we're going to have no nasty surprises on that front.
Yeah.
So now we're arriving to the event. What now?
Yeah, so the first thing is you need to know what's happening. Are you competing early in the morning where you need to be up and ready early? Are you competing midday, before or after lunch? How are you going to manage that with your lunchtime in terms of your food, things like that? What ring are you going to be on? What time are you going to be on? Are you going to be red? Are you going to be blue? So having just that structure of what you need to do, who you're going to be with, and then
Mm,
reverse engineer that in terms of your warm up, in terms of when are you going to go get ready, put on your dough book, when are you going to start to warm up? Are you going to warm up 10 minutes before? I don't think you're going to be in prime condition to perform. Are you going to be warming up 2 hours before? I think you might be overdoing it. So it's getting that fine balance for you, of how long it takes you to perform. And then when you are warming up, again, having that routine that you can
yeah.
adjust with is very important. So, like, are you going to use a partner? Are you going to, what is your system of warming up? Are you just going to go with the flow and just throw a few shapes? Do you have a system? And I think that, like, we have lots of ideas on that. And we have some graphics and things here we can show you later.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of that is just priming the body to be able to do what it needs to do. And it's that simple.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see, like, again, that just brings me back to this kind of thing of, you know, look at the amount of hanging about. Look at some people kind of feeling, they're deliberately practicing, and again, all fine. And it all depends on, where you are in your stage. Do you know what it is you need to be doing for now, or are you just reacting to the environment around you? Because again, if you've your plan, you're going to be okay. If you're
Yeah.
reacting just to the environment around you and you're making decisions on the fly based on you don't want to stand out, it's a challenge. This, by the way, is a weigh-in, and if you've never
Mhm.
seen one, there's better and worse examples, but they can be pretty manic. But yeah,
Yeah,
that
especially for people who are cutting weight, it's not nice to be standing around in like especially a warm country and clammy environment, and there's people
yeah,
everywhere. It's not the most comfortable feeling in the world. So even preparing your mind for that.
yeah, and that can be a thing because usually at a major championships it's the day before. But I mean, that could equally be the theory test at black belt grading where you're maybe sitting in a queue to get it done or waiting for your breaking, and you're watching people breaking or failing worse again in front of you. I think it's always better to watch people succeeding in front of you rather than failing to break in front of you. But, those kind of things are different challenges. But again, you work past those. In terms of our preparation, then we have worked back from when we're meant to start. We now know when we're going to warm up. It gets us into the thing of, well, what's that look like? Are you going to warm up on your own? Do you need a partner? Is your partner your coach? And that becomes
Mm.
another factor. And you need to have a plan for that so that A, you're using your time effectively. To B, you're getting as warm as you need to be in the ways that you need to for the particular event. And C, you're not letting yourself become distracted. Like we so often see it where people try to practice things they're seeing other people do at championships or gradings. They're trying to do things other people are doing out there, and it doesn't make sense. It's not what they've practiced.
Yeah, that's it. One of the most important things for the plan is you know what you're doing, and you're not worrying about other people. It's like it's that thing of what we spoke about earlier when you're like on Instagram or whatever, and you're comparing yourself to other people. Like, oh, that's a good shot. You're like, I wish I'd be able to do that. But just focus on your strengths, what you're good at, and that's the purpose of the
Mm.
plan. It's very, very important to have your own structure. Don't worry about everybody else. Stay in the moment. Worry about you. Everybody looks like a genius on the pads when there's nobody hitting them back, and everybody looks sharp. Everybody looks good. Don't worry about it. Okay, what's important is bringing your strengths to the mat, whether that's in a grading, whether it's in sparring competition, no matter what that is. It's not the time to be learning new stuff. So don't be trying to learn new techniques or do something new. It's not the time. The preparation for all that has been done beforehand. So it's
Mm.
what you have right now in this particular moment. Bring that to the floor with all the strengths that you have in your particular expertise.
So jumping back over here, we can have a look at then a little bit in terms of the how you feel, right,
Mm.
as you get there. And I bring this up the Yerkes-Dodson law. Sometimes we call it an anxiety arousal curve, and then there's other ways of looking at it as well. But they all follow this lovely bell-shaped curve, and the idea is the performance that you're looking for obviously is the highest possible performance that you're capable of. And the amount of, call it stress or anxiety that's going through you has an impact on how well you're going to perform. If it's too low, you're going to be lethargic, bored, sleepy. You're not going to be able to get the most out of yourself. You have to be in a challenge state to do that. There's a lovely sweet spot in the middle, the Goldilocks moment where it's just right. It's enough stress
Mm.
to where you're peaked, the adrenaline is flowing, you're moving well, your brain is active, your nerves are firing, everything is good. You're aware of your environment, all of those things are happening. But you go too far and you get into panic. And you get stressed, you tire yourself out, you tense up, you do all of those things that we don't want to see. And the you know this is the point in time where it's like, oh, okay, now we need to take some control of the situation. So often, the first part, getting yourself up to the top of the curve, is dealt with by the environment, the walking into the arena, the being around the other competitors, the other people grading, your warm up and preparation. That should get you to that top point. And after
Mm.
that, you're just stopping yourself from going over the edge and going too far.
Yeah, definitely. And like for some people who are very very experienced, they've been here. So like from a personal point of view, if I compete, sometimes I'm in kind of just in that yellow phase, and I have to kind of get myself prepared and ready for it, because you've been there so many times that being comfortable and trying to be relaxed is something that you kind of focus on. So for people who are at the kind of more experienced side of things, it's trying to just get that peak correct for the right moment. And then it's kind of like what we said earlier. It's like, what do you need to get your body ready? And if it's something that you're just kind of going with the flow, you don't have a structure, you don't know if it's going to be good for you or not. So
Yeah.
that's why it's very important to have a bit of a structure where you've practiced it before. You've done it in your club sessions. You've done it to prepare in squad sessions if you're on the national team, of how to prepare, how to warm up. It's so important, and people really take it for granted. And one of the reasons for this is your first contest. Usually it's a make or break one, especially at a tournament.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to, because everybody knows once you get your first one out of the way, you can kind of settle into your natural rhythm and kind of how you are naturally. But it's preparing for that first one sometimes is a challenge for a lot of people. It's trying to hit the ground running, that you're not too slow starting, you're not overwhelmed, and it's just getting that right moment for when you step on the mats for the first time. And a lot of it is just is the waiting game as well. When you're waiting around and you're kind of almost stressed out a little bit and things like that. And there's a nice curve here as well that illustrates it. So it's having that routine of how you can control yourself. And we might talk about some emotional controls and tools that you can use as well, give you guys some ideas of that. But it's being able to control that is very, very important.
Yeah, and I mean, this one is just talking about, I suppose, the more long term for when you're training and preparing, that the amount of pressure you put upon yourself, or that the training puts on you, you want it to be where you're beyond comfortable in that stretch state where it's just a bit uncomfortable, and that's going to elicit the greatest improvement in performance. But when you go too far, you end up in this strain or burnout kind of phase, and it's very much the same thing as our anxiety arousal one, where when we go too far, we have to recognize we've gone too far and dial back and stay in that sweet spot. And that's where, as Richie says, if you have that warm up and that preparation practice, you can do that. You're better prepared to do that. You have a plan for that. Whereas if you just find yourself there, you could be yo-yoing to the bathroom and puking and doing all of the other bits that people do. Talking about nonsense, talking yourself in and out of, and eventually you become your own worst enemy and self-defeat. And we don't want to be there. So something that the Navy SEALs have made very famous as one example, and we'll talk about others, is this notion of box breathing. And all it is a breathing activity that focuses the mind on only the one thing, which is the control of your breathing, which helps get you a little bit centered, a little bit calm, and it helps bring you back from that over-aroused state. And it's very simply this: you inhale, takes 4 seconds to inhale, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and you hold that exhale for 4 seconds, and you repeat that maybe 8 times, and you're done. And then you move on. So a small little thing like that, if you know a progressive muscular relaxation technique, so there's a range of them, but it's all basically about creating tension in parts of your body, living with or experiencing that tension, and then breathing out and letting it go, and doing that progressively through the body from head to toe, toes to the head, whichever way you want to do it. But what that does is it gives you something, again, as Richie said earlier, that you can control. And by taking control, now you're in charge of where you are on that curve. And, you have your warm up and your hitting or whatever it happens to be, or your pattern practice at full power to get you into the right position in the curve. And if the environment, the stressors, the changes, put you beyond it, you need a couple of checks and balances in terms of maybe your breath control, in terms of your progressive muscular relaxation to bring you back down. And, it's simple
The
tools.
key to all of that stuff, Adrian, is to make you present. And like
Yes.
whether we're very, very low or whether we're very, very high is usually dependent on whether our thoughts are in the past or the future. And more likely when what we're talking about today, it's in the future. You're worried about your performance. You're worried
Yeah.
about what's going to happen in an hour's time, in 20 minutes time, whatever. If you can bring yourself back to what's important right now in this moment, it's very, very useful. And you can do that through your breathing. You can do it through, and again, it all comes back to having that routine. If you're on track in your routine, it's impossible for you to be worried about something else, okay? Because you're worried about, okay, what do I have to do here in terms of my next part of my routine to get me prepared, to get me ready? And there's very simple emotional tools. You can use your posture, sitting up straight. Getting your posture is a great one. Like just visualize your body language as a champion. How would a champion or somebody who's an expert and extremely confident carry themselves in this situation? And by just replicating that, you'll be very, very fascinated by how it helps your emotional state very quickly. And it's why? Because it brings you back to the present moment. So you're in the present for that moment. You're not thinking about the future. And that's what a lot of these things are. It's just like even the visualization, things like that. Although the visualization, you're kind of thinking about the future, you're in the moment thinking about it, if that makes sense. And there's lots of tricks you can use. You can like, what's my next talk going to be? So that's one that you can use. People use meditation. People use a lot of different things. And there's a vast amount on the internet you can go and explore. These is finding what works best for you to bring you present and make you present in the moment.
Yeah, and I mean that one, the what is next, what is now, and there's a couple of different ones that play with that acronym. I find that so useful when you're in the ring. When you have to make an immediate bump, it's that win mentality. And what's important now. There's so many different ones that all work, but the important, what we're really looking for out of that is you are looking about, stop thinking about what just happened that got you in this situation. Stop thinking about what might happen in the future that might exacerbate the situation or might improve the situation. Think about what's important now. What do I do next? And if you can do that, now you've brought yourself, your emotions under control, because you're thinking about what can we do in this exact moment in time to improve our situation. And that's always good.
And why is that? It's because you can control it. And that's what we spoke about at the very start of this conversation. You can't control the future. You can't control the past, but you can control this moment right now. And that's kind of like liberating in a way as well, when you're trying to control your nerves and your anxiety that you might have around the performance. And it just centers you for a little bit.
And just to go back onto that one, I want to throw up that graphic again, because this comes up sometimes in between rounds. Or in between sections of a grading. So in Ireland, we do our black belt grading in sections. So you might come up and perform a physical section, then you come up for your hand and foot techniques, you come up for your pattern, you come up for prearranged sparring, self-defense, you come up for sparring. So you have all of those various sections, and you don't do them all in one continuous run. You do them, a section at a time. But even if you didn't, this still applies. You sometimes are stressed about one particular opponent, or your first match in sparring, or your first round in patterns, or, for example, the breaking section in the grading, or whatever it happens to be. And sometimes what happens is you overcome that, you do all of the right things, and you achieve your potential. You win your first round in your patterns, your sparring, or you go and perform your patterns for the grading without any stops, mistakes, anything that's causing drama. And then you end up in this kind of weird situation where you're on an emotional high, because you built that thing up so much that having achieved it, you feel like you've already won something. And we even see this sometimes with people who make a weigh-in. It's like they feel like they've already achieved something. All they did is stand on the scales and be qualified for the competition, but they feel like they achieved something because they focused on it so much for so long. So we never want that. So sometimes you have to apply some of these tools we're talking about after you win, after you progress through a round, after, and then that's the case where you might need to center again, that what's important now. That's like, okay, I need to make sure, get my breathing under control. I need to get my refueling in if it's important. If there's a long break between the rounds, maybe I need to get some carbs in. If there's a short break, maybe I need my water or my isotonic drink. I have to be thinking about those things. If it's, between sections of the grading, maybe you need to have your sparring gear to hand for the next section. Maybe you need to go and get your boards and take them to, to the breaking section, or maybe you need to, wash and dry your hands after sparring because you're going to do a theory section. Whatever it happens to be, there's you should always be, have a plan for what to do when you win, when you perform well, because that has to be in your head that you are going to do that. You shouldn't be surprised when you get to the end of it and go, what's now? And be super happy and elated, but not actually moving to the next level of performance.
And we spoke about this with Ursha, a fantastic competitor from Slovenia. I think it was around this time last year, possibly. And she studies sports psychology at the minute. And she spoke about how she defeated the current world champion. I think it was in the semi-final or quarter-final. And then her next contest suffered because of that, because that was her final. And I think it might have been the semi-final, and in her final then I think she might have been unsuccessful and she didn't get the result. And she spoke about how that happened because that was her final, and she wasn't prepared for that, and she was almost not in the moment. Then again, and that's what we call choking in terms of sports psychology. It's just it's the same thing, just not being present in the moment, and a lot of things come back to that, really.
Oh, they absolutely do, and I mean that's for us. I think the element of, again, everything that we've talked about today hinges on control, but the control you can't have unless you also have the awareness. The awareness you can't have unless you've made a plan. So, for us, it's kind of like, there's this endless cycle of, you have your experience, you reflect on your experience, and you set a plan. And so I think maybe we just look at that part. Let's have a look at the reflection on the experience and what we have there as well, because after the event you want to go back to what you said you'd do in your plan, and go and look at it. So maybe talk through this one, Richie.
Yeah, so I just made this little kind of review document, and I think one of the most important things for this is everybody wants to change what didn't go well, but I think it's very, very important also to double down on what did go well, and not change everything, and not just throw everything out with the kitchen sink. What was it? Throw everything out with the bathwater. Is that the phrase, how it goes?
Yeah, and it's one of these things that I've noticed that podcasters and presenters and different people from Australia and New Zealand, they don't say www for World Wide Web, or for an internet URL. They have www, but the www for this is always the what went well, and it's always a question that I ask, even when people have lost. Like, we don't want to start with what you've, and they hate it. I gotta say, people don't like this, because they're feeling so sorry for themselves. They don't want. It's like, nothing. It was crap. Everything was terrible because I lost. It's like, but nothing is ever completely terrible. And you have to start, for me, with reminding yourself of, well, what went well. What did I do right? What went well?
I actually feel there's a very important lesson in that as well, Adrian, in terms of your preparation, because if your mentality is always like, if you can see the silver lining on everything, that's actually very useful in your preparation, because when the doubts pop up, and they will, do you have that ability to see the positive of it and the silver lining of it all? And so it's very important that as a skill, and you can actually practice that. Like, you can be walking down the road and something happens to you, and you can have it in your mind that no matter what happens, you're going to make it a choice, which it is, to see the most positive light in it straight away. And it's a very, very useful tool in terms of the mental side of it. But just coming back to the review, you have what worked well and why. The why is so important, hence why it's highlighted in red. And then you see in small here in the top right, it says ammunition. So that will go into your future plan of your ammunition, the stuff that you have, the tools of your strengths, the evidence. So important to have that proof to build your confidence, because you have two types of confidence. You have the proactive and the reactive. Your reactive is like how you're feeling in the moment, and okay, I'm flowing, I'm going well, it looks good in my warm-up. But then you have your proactive confidence, the stuff that's been put in the groundwork in before, and you have proof of, like this. And like, then you have like, what would you change? You don't have to change absolutely everything, but if you were to do it different, would you be happy to go along with this every single time to get your peak performance? If the answer is no, then maybe what will you change? And the most important thing is, what is the single most challenging thing at the event for you? And then by starting by that, it's a great place. So you don't have to change absolutely everything straight away. And it's a lot of this is like tweaking, going through it as well, and then like, why are you in a better place for competing? Like, I've never ever competed where it was a reason that wasn't a positive outcome. So even if you don't get the result, it is progressed on to something positive in the future. And that's very, very important. You're never going to be worse off for competing or putting yourself out there or testing yourself in any way. So it's always a positive reason, and to take that is very, very important as well.
And before you jump in and finish off some of these things here, I think what's really important is there's a subtext to all of this as well, which is if you really genuinely want to answer those questions properly, if you really do, you need to engage in a couple of different ways. And I think that the ways that you engage make this extra valuable. So what worked well and why? You're either going to have to talk to your opponents, talk to your friends or teammates, talk to your parents for the younger kids, watch yourself back on a video. And all of those behaviors are generating a discussion around the event that just happened. So we're not parking it. We're not forgetting about it right away. The fact we then have to, manage those conversations, or at least get someone to video it and watch it back, means I'm reflecting on my performance. And that's a huge skill that is going to carry into every aspect of life. And then the last one for me is you're writing it down. And going back to Richie's ammunition and evidence, that's a huge deal, because we as people, and I think this is culturally different, but my experience of Irish people is we are really bad at giving ourselves a pat on the back and telling ourselves when we did something well. And we're even worse at remembering it, because what happens is you walk away from the event and maybe you did something very well, or maybe you continued with some good behaviors or actions. But the second you're gone, it starts to fade from memory, as all things do. But the fact that you've now built up your competition plans and reviews, you have your book of evidence of, and your videos maybe go with that. I did it. And it's irrefutable. It was written down. Now it's history. It's fact. Now it's always going to be, observer's choice, but like what you write down, what you want to write down. But sometimes even lying in something like this could be powerful. And I'm not advocating that necessarily, but if you tell yourself that something went well, and you write it down and you do that enough times, there's a power to that as well. That's almost like I don't want to say like, the promise, the book or whatever, where you're kind of like trying to attract the secret. That's the one. You're trying to, attract good vibes or whatever happens. Yeah. It's not so much that, but your brain.
But anything that you believe,
yeah,
whether it's factual or not, it doesn't matter. If you truly believe in it, it's powerful. Yeah, exactly. 100%. It
has impact.
One of the important things you said there, Adrian, and we haven't really spoke about it, which is vital, and we kind of almost take it for granted, is get somebody to video your performance.
Yeah,
it's very, very important for review, and it's something that I actually don't have on this document there now, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I'm going to include it for my own students, because it's something that we take for granted. I always tell them to get a video, get your parents, get your friends, record your performance, because it's very hard to kind of, when you're in the moment, and it's hard to go back and view it. And we don't always have the luxury of having live streams and things like that. So don't leave it to chance.
For sure. And for me, that's the thing, that just having to fill in this little form that seems so simple that you could do and scribble it down in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
You're going to have to invest a little bit of time in doing this well. That investment of time is reflection. That reflection is going to make the experience more memorable, more meaningful in many ways. And in doing that, the lessons are actually sinking in. They're staying home. And I love that last question, which wasn't on my stuff and which I am going to be including in the future, though. Why are you in a better place now for having competed? Because sometimes, especially if you're coming out of something where you didn't win or you didn't meet your own expectations, you're able to tell yourself it's all a waste of time and, all those kind of things. It's easy to take a defeatist attitude to it. The reality is, though, like that, they're very, I can't think of an event where I didn't learn something about myself by going.
So, and that's why I love competition personally. And like any international competition, it's like on the plane home is where I do my best kind of analysis and thinking about it and review, and using that to plan future, whether it's your training, your events, how you're going to prepare, whatever that is. So it's like, that's why I love competition personally, because it's a real live test of what's working, what's not working. And then it makes it's because it's all about the journey. Like the destination is great, and it's fantastic when you get to the medals, but it's the chase and the excitement of trying to get there is what the real excitement comes from.
So trying to, because it's going to fall out of my head if I don't say it now. We were just doing with the coaches committee, the coaches profiles, and one of the first coaches we're profiling is Edgardo Villanueva, Massa Villanueva from Argentina. Phenomenal coach. But his quote, we can't actually put in the first quote he gave us. It's good. I'll tell you off air. But the second one that he gave us is that it was basically on that concept of the medals, and he said, you win the medals in the dojang, you only go to the competition to collect them. And
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it is that thing of, look, that's the end is the competition, but it's the
Mm.
experience along the way which is
Have
actually
a
the
look at the
journey.
quote. Have a look at the quote I have at the very top of this event review here. The point isn't the medals, but the testing yourself to get a step closer to the best you. And that's what it's about. It's not really about the medals.
For sure. What do you think about or would you like to go through just those ratings and
Yep.
what they mean?
Yeah, so just I'll go through them very quickly. So how
Yeah.
well did you achieve your event goal? So that's something that we have on the plan document. What is
Yes.
your goal for the event? And it has to be something that you can control. You can't control coming first place. So
No.
what is your event goal? Is it you're going to give absolute 100%? You're going to prepare really well? I don't know. It's personal, but it has to be controllable. You can't control if you score 500 points. You can't control if you win. You can't control these things. So something that's in your control, and how well did you achieve that? And the second thing that we have is rate your preparation in the months and weeks leading up to the event. Just like Master Villaneva, the medals are won in the dojang, as he said. So it's your preparation prior is what's going to be very, very important. And then the third one here is your other preparation, which we spoke about a lot today. Rate your preparation for the event. So your sleep, your food, your water, your warm up, etc. Next, we have how happy were you with your warm up? Okay, which is obviously we spoke about that in detail. How happy were you with your mental preparation and your performance? Okay, very, very important in terms of preparation. We spoke about it in depth here today, but also your performance, as in when you're in the ring, when things don't go so well, are you giving that 100%? Do you have the correct attitude? Are you making the right decisions? Are you giving up easy? What's your mental performance in the ring or on the mats, whatever? How would you score your work rate? One of the only things you can control. If you give absolutely 100%, then that's all you can do. So it's very, very important that you give as much as you can in terms of your
Mm-hmm.
work rate. It's one of the very few things you can control. And next one, how would you rate your attitude and mindset? Very similar. We just kind of touched on that there as well. How would you rate your game plan and strategy, more so for sparring? So we have this thing called the big two. So two big things that you want to start off the match to give you like a mini win. So maybe that's taking control of the ring in the center early on. Maybe it's getting off the first shot. It's something that gives you a mini win to kind of set the ball rolling, give you a bit of momentum for your performance, and then your plan and your strategy. Not really dwelling on the opponent, but what is the thing that you can bring to the forefront that will challenge anybody and give anybody a hard day in that ring? And that's the most important thing, especially at the high level. Anybody can beat anybody if you can bring your strengths to the table in a better way than they can. And
Yeah.
it's not like a lot of people make the mistake of, like I've done it so many times myself, trying to outsmart the other person in terms of their game plan and what they're good at. It's good to be prepared, but it's also you need to bring what you're good at to the forefront. Very, very important. How I'm just making sure I don't skip any. How well did you control your distance, tempo, and ring position? So not very controllable, but there are controllables in the sparring ring which are very important. So controlling the distance between you and the opponent, the tempo of the contest, and your ring position. So by
Mm-hmm.
controlling these as best you can, they will really set you up for success in terms of sparring. And finally, how would you rate your overall performance? And then in brackets it says, would you be happy to perform this way always? And I think that's very, very important. Would you be happy if this was always your preparation? If not, there's some things may need to be tweaked. But what worked well, let's keep that and double down on it. Okay, it's very
So
important.
yeah, and what I really love about this process of challenging a person to do that is you start with a big overall and you finish with a big overall, but in between,
Yeah,
you're asking them to take apart the controllables and the areas in their performance that lead to those overalls in the end, and making them reflect on, oh, it wasn't just my 4 minutes in the ring or my 8 minutes in the ring. Did I do all of the things well? Did I plan
yeah,
well? Did I prepare well? Did I execute well? Did I commit well? Did I concentrate well? All those things. And I think in doing that, what actually happens when you truly do that is you stop going like broadly generalizing to, I had a bad day. I didn't perform
Yeah,
well. And you
that's so
start to
true.
go into, no, it's not
It
that I didn't
maps it for
perform
you.
well. I didn't prepare well, or I didn't execute well, or I didn't, commit fully to my preparation and execution.
Mm.
And in doing that, now I don't have to fix me. I have to fix my behavior, my implementation, my whatever. So you go from something that's too broad to be a goal. You can't fix
Yeah.
you, but you can fix how well you prepare for the event. You can fix, you can work on your application of a plan. And I think that's really important and empowering.
100%. Look at that little bit down the end there. You probably can't see it on the screen, guys, but in the part where what will you keep doing, the part that's in
Mm-hmm.
red and blue, the subtext under that says, ask yourself what actions, and actions is highlighted, do you need to take to adjust slash improve? And it's like, what are the actions you're going to take in the future? It's great knowing this stuff, but you have to put it into practice. It's
Yeah.
like we spoke about this on a lot of shows before. It's like, what are the actions that you're going to apply and the habits that are going to make you consistently get to the direction that you want to get in.
And I think now's a really good time because we have a couple of, I think really kind of helpful comments in here as well, because
Yeah.
we have some people who are not just Taekwondo people themselves, but they're parents of Taekwondo people. And
Yeah. That's
and
actually great.
and it's really, I would love to ask also a question of them. You can feel free to put some of them in there, but I genuinely don't believe that the conversation that we've just had over the last hour is even vaguely front of mind for most parents whose child has told them, I don't want to go to the competition. I'm nervous about my grading, etc. Because what we've talked about, which is from our perspective, what the goal of this is, it's about achieving those, step by step micro improvements over a prolonged period of time by setting challenges, holding ourselves accountable, planning, preparing, executing, reviewing, plan, prepare, execute, review over time. That makes us better people, makes us stronger
Mm.
people. And I don't mean just at sparring or at patterns or at
Yeah.
competition. I mean, this is how you approach the project that we have with Taekwondo Coach Academy. You can say, this is how we approach what we tried to do in building Team Ireland over the last 15 years. And all of those kind of things. They're real life challenges and real life skills to solve real life challenges that help you to build a plan of action, to build resilience, to build, the things that we really need right now. And for me, I think that's where, if you could summarize that into a 3-minute video that a parent would watch, I think we'd nail it. But I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. It
Yeah.
takes a little bit more
But like,
time.
that's it. Like, a lot of these things do apply to general life in terms of like the things of like when you're stressed about work or when you're stressed about the coronavirus. It's being present. Bring that back to these things, like all these
Yeah.
things. Anything that's very valuable is a universal principle, I believe, and that's very, very important. But like, just touching on what you said there about kids not wanting to do it, I
Mm.
think it's very important to show them this challenge mindset and the challenge approach. And Damien just put in this, he was also a parent, but he competes himself.
Yeah.
It's sometimes of course we don't, because we have this idea of, if something is like scary as a kid, or you don't want to put yourself in that situation. But there's two things that make you improve. Number one is courage to step on that mat, and two, challenge. And challenge happens in both ways. Challenge yourself courageously and you'll get better and you'll get evidence of your confidence. And the second part of this is also challenge state. So we have challenge versus threat. Is this event a threat to you, or is it a challenge to you? And
Yeah.
that mindset that you bring is massive. And that's actually one of the overarching principles of this document that I created, because it all is geared around creating a challenge mindset, that you want to step on the mats because you want to challenge yourself, because you're going to be better. It's going to improve you. Nothing terrible is going to happen. You're like, because of a result in a sporting event is not going to be life or death. It's bringing that back to a challenge mindset is so, so important.
So some very, very simple bits, because and don't get me wrong, I entirely agree with what you're saying. Just conscious of the time, and just there's a couple of good questions and comments that are popping in here. So we'll look at some of those. From Galina, handy to have your name and club on your sparring gear, especially for younger competitors. And as someone who cleans up after the competitions on a regular basis, and the lost and found can be pretty epic, it can definitely endorse that. The gear is expensive enough, particularly, there's a lot of countries where I remember my first pair of gloves was 1 month's wages for my mum, and it
Wow.
was £33, and that'll tell you it was a long time ago. So in 1989, the first pair of gloves, but it was that was my mum's month's wages. She was working part time, so getting that as a present was a big deal. It took me a year to get my set of sparring gear together. Now the impressive thing is I sold those gloves 10 years later for €30, so or 30 pounds maybe I think. So they did well.
Almost making a profit of them.
Almost, pretty much. But yeah, very relevant. And then from Mike, photo of the time and ring stickers, and
Yeah.
parents take a photo too. So not every country will have these, but what happens for all of our competitors in Ireland, when you go to the competition, the schedule is personalised down to an individual level. So everybody will have their ring number and time slot for their pattern, sparring, and special technique or whatever they're doing, and as well as their competitor ID number. And that just means that their height check is done or their weight check is done on the sticker. They know where they have to be and what time. And of course, the very first thing they do is lose it. So the
Yeah.
parents have it. It's
That's
very
ITA
helpful.
competitions as well, by the way, just in
True. Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Irish Taekwondo Association competitions. It's not every competition in Ireland, so very
Sure.
fortunate to be to have that luxury, and it does make a massive difference in the organisation and the smooth running of a competition as well.
Yeah, and you do have people get a little bit annoyed with you when the competition starts to run ahead of schedule or whatever, but trust us, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah.
Really nice question as well from Lawrence. And again, hello to our Canadian friend. Would you do something similar for the coaches, like a self-evaluation of your coaching or an evaluation form for the students or athletes to fill? And, at on our coach education, like to understand how it's structured right from the very introduction to coaching, which is a 2-day course, 12 hours. The very first thing you're starting to do as a coach is to not just self-evaluate your own coaching, and it's guided self-evaluation, but you're in peer group guided evaluations as well. So you will get peer feedback and review, but that is strongly driven again on the same premise as the athletes one of no. Talk to us about what you did that went to plan. Talk to us about what went well. Then find something to improve, and then we'll start to prioritize the things that you're going to improve
Mm.
on. But that's done at our lowest level. It's carried through to our next level of coaching qualification, where you're going to have to actually fill in a full plan do review cycle repeatedly. So you are going to set a plan, you're going to execute on your plan, and you're going to review against your plan, both peer reviewed and your own review. But it doesn't work unless there was a plan, because you can't say it did or didn't work unless there was a plan in the first place. So
Yeah.
we're very strong on insisting that the coaches do that, just to get their base qualification. And it just gets deeper and deeper the further qualified the coaches are, because you start getting
Mm.
into season long ones where you're taking more detailed measurements of where an athlete is at, before you then set a plan of action and review it. But it's like self-reflection for coaches is massive. It's just massive. And
I think you did a post on that yesterday, Adrian, didn't you? Self-reflection on the ITF Coaches Committee.
that's right. Yeah. And there's a few details and comments on that for sure. And actually, there's a podcast and a book recommendation coming out on Saturday that will kind of touch onto some of that as well as some broader coaching skills. But like, you're 100% right there, Lawrence. The reality is that if you're not engaging in self-reflection, you are absolutely letting progress like ooze out the sides. It's like a leaky pipe trying to deliver water.
Yeah.
Some of it'll get there. Some knowledge will sink in, but you will lose so much just to the inefficiency of not actually reflecting. Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
as well, it's important that there's different types. Like, are we talking about the coaching of the preparation? Are we talking about the coaching on the day event? Because it's different. And the
It
more
is.
advanced your students are, like if you're one coach and you're trying to cater for every single student, you're going to be running around, and you don't have time to prepare this student and to prepare that student. So it's going to be it will be on their back as well. So where you are important is helping your student to be kind of have that kind of
Independence.
challenge mindset, yeah,
Mm.
a high level of control and a high level of confidence based on how you approach the relationship with them. And then, of course, in the ring, the correct advice you're giving. Are you shouting 120 things at them? Are you helping them the correct way in the halftime break and things like that? So evaluating those is very important as a coach as well.
Yeah, and we'd actually made a note before coming onto this to talk about that halftime and what that
Yeah.
sounds like. So yeah, Richie, do you want to just deliver on that? Because it's one of those little take homes that unfortunately we see this butchered on so many occasions, and I've certainly been guilty of butchering it. It took me a while to learn
Yeah.
that this was there's a good way and a bad way to do this.
Yeah, definitely. We did a graphic on this before. Actually, I might post it after the show, and we should have had it prepared. But it's we can all be guilty of this because we're extremely passionate about our students and about the sport. But like shouting 120 things and trying to actually like be a remote control coach doesn't work. It's not a PlayStation controller, and you're controlling your athlete.
Real
So
people.
it's like yeah, especially at a halftime, like shouting 120 things at your student isn't going to be useful. If you can actually, especially with the older guys, if you can have two-way communication, it's very important because what
Yeah.
you can see and what they can see is not always the same. So by looking at what's working well, one thing, and what's not working so well, one thing, and having that little bit of communication on the both of those to have a plan going forward is very, very important. And also trying to keep things calm, not trying to elevate the person. Well, they might need it, but in terms of like trying to bring their heart rate down to get that recovery in the round as well. So don't start shouting at them straight away. Like it has to be done in a relaxed manner. And we spoke about as well the whole idea of sitting or standing. And John Mackey, who was on the Black Belt, our podcast with Jamie, recently spoke about this. And he said, based on some of the work he's been doing in sports science, it makes more sense, possibly with lactic acid and things like that, to maybe slowly walk up and down rather than sit, especially considering that we don't sit in training, which is a fantastic point. So maybe just walking along the person and bringing down the heart rate, that kind of idea of active recovery could be quite important as well. So it might be something personally I'm going to have a little bit of an experiment with some of my students once we get back. Hopefully I don't forget about it by the time we get back because it's been so long. But I think, yeah, hopefully it's something that we can work with and see how it works.
Well, I think that kind of covers the topic for us for today. And again, while we're out of time for questions and that now, if anyone has questions and they want to put it into the YouTube comments or hit us on any of the social media, we'd be happy to get back and answer those or carry those forward. It's been a great chat today. I've kind of enjoyed digging into this. And again, thanks to everybody who's dropped in on the session and asked a question or offered a comment. And thank you for the birthday wishes as well. No, I've definitely enjoyed the chat around this. It's just a topic that's very easy to get engaged with.
Yeah, especially like it's actually something that people don't speak about too often, but it's very, very important, and it can be a make or break in terms of your preparation, whether that is grading or whether it is competition and tournament. So I'm happy that we were able to chat through it and hopefully help some people out that watch this video. As always, if you've got any questions, as Adrian said, hit us up. We'll be happy to help people out as always. Make sure and like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, everybody.